In the Iryna Zarutska case, fleeing Ukraine's wartime violence, a 23-year-old woman's life was savagely taken here. The shock and outrage that her murder deserved was quickly washed out by the news cycle. Newly released 911 phone calls from witnesses at the scene say the police, who should have been there to protect her, were nowhere to be found.
The fire person got here, but there's no police person. And the guy that did it is standing over here on the ramp.
Even though the suspect, Carlos Brown, was quickly taken into custody. Now he's charged federally and faces the death penalty, but it's too late for Iryna. 5 years ago, the growing calls across the nation were to defund the police.
To end policing as we know it, and to recreate systems of public safety that actually keep us safe.
5 years later, Lake and Riley, Iryna Zarutska, and many more are gone. And who's next? As Chicago stifles immigrations and custom enforcement, we need to talk about police, crime, and its growing list of victims. All that and what it means for your weekend on the Comm Center. Wake up, America. It's the Comm Center with Drew Breezy. It's a TV show on the internet about two best friends who are called by a small-town sheriff to investigate a radio station so evil it only plays singles by Taylor Swift. I'm John. I'm an actual 911 dispatcher. I've been doing that job in my community for more than 10 years. I'm joined, as always, by my podcasting partner with police benefits. That's Drew Breezy. He was a cop for 29 years. Not just a cop, but a cop's cop. He was patrol. He was a sergeant, a lieutenant. He was a boss of things. He investigated a lot of stuff. He's coming to us live tonight from the home of America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, Dallas, Texas. Drew, it's been a week. How have you been?
It's been a week. That's a great way to put it. I've been great. We've got to we're trying to revamp a few things, John, like so everyone understands.
Am I about to be fired live on the air?
No,
this was in my contract, so I knew it was coming.
This was my dream that we would get to this. I'm coming to you live from AI Marketing World. So we're about to boost our presence all over the place, by the way, because the networking here is amazing. 1, 2, in our experience, every good true crime story starts with a 911 call. And normally, as you were about to see, every single one of them ends differently. You're about to hear a 911 call that this is something I've been pounding the drum for quite a long time, since I retired, as a matter of fact, probably long before that, where when you wage a war on cops, and people still to this day seem to think that it's imaginary, that it doesn't exist, and that it's blah, 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 the thin blue line protects one another and all this other stuff. When you wage a war on cops, hopefully you feel better about yourself, whether it's cops or ICE or whatever. And we have an episode where we've covered this ICE situation where they were surrounded. But you're only putting your own safety in jeopardy, because cops in general, and I was one of them, understand that our mission is to protect everybody who calls 911 or who walks into a police station or who's sitting on a bus very innocently, just trying to get from one place to another. And when you wage war on us, either violently or through cutting budgets or constantly second guessing us, whether it's on social media or in mainstream media,
or demonizing the police, it tends to drive the good officers away, because nobody's going to put up with that. I didn't want to put up. I wasn't about to put up with that anymore. And because I know what's in my heart, and I've always known the people I worked around. I know that there are bad people in law enforcement, and I know that there are bad people in healthcare, and there are bad people at the schools, and there are bad people everywhere. Like, yeah, that's called life. And you can't make one bad person represent all of them just because you get a 6-second clip on social media. Just like, we're about to play a clip of a guy committing a very heinous act, and he doesn't represent all of his whatever, fill in the blank. He doesn't represent all mentally ill people. He doesn't represent all black people. He doesn't represent all prisoners or men.
But there is a flaw in the system, and we're about to probably tackle it head on.
We're going to completely deconstruct the system. And the question that I have in mind for you in the comments, but also watching us live, is the question I want to ask you as we deconstruct our criminal justice system. We lay it bare. We're going to have some receipts for you. It might get a little dry, but we're going to keep it moving as well as we can. Who's responsible for the death of Iryna Zarutska? Is it just DeCarlos Brown, or is it also a corrupt and crumbling criminal justice system that's enabled by terrible policies and politics? Or is it all of us for enabling that system? As we start, I'm going to go ahead and go to the news that played. It's got some recordings about the 911 calls from the train when Iryna Zarutska was fatally wounded, and a critical question asked by someone who was making one of those 911 phone calls.
911 calls reveal the frantic moments after a woman was stabbed to death on a Charlotte light rail train back in August. Callers say they didn't see any officers or security around when it happened. WCCV Charlotte's Casey Jones is live in South End with more. Casey.
Morgan, a new audit released this week shows that CATS has spent more than $49 million on security since 2022. The current contract allows for more than 200 security officers, but people who called 911 the night that Iryna Zarutska was murdered say they didn't see security anywhere. New video shows DeCarlos Brown wandering around the east-west station for several minutes after stabbing Iryna Zarutska. This video contradicts what police have said that they arrested him as he exited the light rail train.
The only pain, this man just stabbed this woman for no reason.
Newly released 911 calls reveal the frantic moments when CATS riders tried to get help for Zarutska.
There's just a lady right now on the ground with a lot of blood, and everybody's screaming that she got stabbed, and I don't know if anybody's called 911 yet. People are just freaking out.
A new state audit shows CATS has spent $49 million on security since 2022, but 911 callers say they didn't see any officers.
The fire person got here, but there's no police presence. And the guy that did it is standing over here on the ramp.
This surveillance video shows CMPD officers arrest Brown on the platform. CATS pays for 219 private security officers, but there are currently 33 vacancies. CATS CEO Brent Cagle says off-duty CMPD officers are filling in the gaps.
And we acknowledge that there is more to do. And we will continue to increase visual presence throughout the system, as well as increase fair enforcement activities.
In an email, I asked CATS what they're doing to fill the security vacancies. No one replied. We did find this LinkedIn post showing that Professional Police Service is hiring transit security for all shifts.
We also advertise on job boards like Indeed, where we're actively recruiting for good, solid officers who are looking for an opportunity.
CATS officials say it is not realistic to have an officer on all trains, but here tonight we have seen a CMPD officer that was on the platform and then got on the train, just kind of securing the area there. CATS officials say in the next few weeks you can also expect to see more officers on bikes and UTVs here along the rail trail. And the state auditor says this was just the preliminary report, and they will soon release a full report.
Drew, it's not realistic to have someone on every train, and it's possible that had someone been there, this attack wouldn't have happened. In fact, police presence can be very dissuasive to attacks like this, and maybe it would have happened at some other time in some other place with some victim anyway. But there's a hiring crisis, at least among transit security, and certainly Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department, which I'm going to break down. But it seems like they're having all these vacancies. Aren't they trying to fix a problem that was created by bad policies some time ago?
Yes. Let's back this up just a little bit, because I made reference to, and Abby Ellsworth and I have done an episode about, and John, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, about how the media vilifies cops. And it's, whether it's subtle as a sledgehammer or it's just the norm now. WCCB there, whose footage we used with Casey Jones as the reporter, she was trained at an American university, I'm assuming. She was trained by her editor, who teaches her where to sniff out the story and what the story is here. So when the Ukrainian girl is stabbed in the neck and bleeds out in front of all the people on the train who are horrified, and frozen and shocked because Iryna didn't even know what happened. They didn't know what happened until long after, this guy had exited the train. Why does the story become they called 911 and the cops weren't there? So how many times have you heard in your lifetime, there's never a cop around when you need them because they can't be everywhere at once? So when you do stories like this that vilify the cops, and in this case, it's security, it's some type of security force that the transportation authority uses. But when you vilify the cops, what do you expect? Do you expect an overabundance of people who are willing to take the blame when some guy takes a sharp object out of his jacket and slices the throat of some unsuspecting, completely innocent angel, beautiful woman here in America trying to make her way, sitting on a bus, taking public transportation because we got to save the universe, John.
Well, let's...
And all of a sudden it becomes the cops' fault for not being there.
Yeah. Shifting blame away from DeCarlos Brown, we have to have that narrative, of course, because of the way that the politics and policies are in Charlotte and many other, let's face it, gang, blue cities across this country. The narrative of an African-American man attacking a white woman with a knife, not a gun. This exposes that the usual rhetoric that they use to get around crimes like these, it just isn't going to work. But let's talk about why there aren't any police officers. I hate to go back down this route, but we did have someone in our comments lately, and we're nothing if not responsive to our comments. Do leave a comment below. We responded 99.9% of them. But someone in our comments recently said that the Defund the Police movement really never happened. And this is typical gaslighting that we see from the other side, trying to make us believe that nothing ever happened. Well, we've come tonight with a few receipts that we're going to get to, but just so that there is no gaslighting going on, I've gone to a contemporaneous source, which means I pulled a video from right there in Charlotte, North Carolina, from the year 2021 at the height of the defund crisis. And we're going to listen to what people in 2021 said the defund movement was. It wasn't just a figurative social movement to reform police. It was an actual movement to destroy police. And I'm not going to have the modern people be gaslit and brainwashed out of remembering. So we're going to watch this brief video saying in 2021 what that movement was.
Weeks of protests across the U.S., a movement to defund the police has gained mainstream attention. The phrase is catchy, but it's more complicated than its literal translation. So, what are supporters of the movement asking for? Defunding the police is a broad phrase that refers to a range of policy changes. Although it varies depending on who you ask, the concept generally means reducing spending on police forces and reallocating those funds to other community services. For example, the mayor of Sacramento, California, has said he's open to changing 911 services so others are sent to handle mental health and homeless calls instead of police officers.
Police officers themselves, who are trained in law enforcement, are not mental health workers or clinicians. They're not homeless experts. And so what I'm in favor of and would be in favor of in shifting those resources.
The mayor of Los Angeles said he'll allocate $250 million to youth jobs, health initiatives, and peace centers, $150 million of which would come from the LA Police Department.
We'll be working to identify $250 million to be able to invest in jobs and community programs, healing for our Black community, other communities of color, for women and others who have been historically denied equitable opportunities. And yes, that comes from multiple places, including our biggest department, the police department.
Proponents of defunding see police budgets as bloated and misappropriated. What defunding the police doesn't mean is completely cutting public safety budgets or dissolving police departments. After outcry following the death of George Floyd, a veto-proof majority of the Minneapolis City Council declared their intent to dismantle their police force and rethink public safety. They said the current system was irreparable, and an entirely new system needs to be created. No specific plans have been outlined, but council members plan to work with the community to develop them. Although other municipalities may not go to extremes, the Defund the Police movement already has local governments and communities looking to make changes. After weeks of protests across the U.S., a movement asked.
Sorry, I replayed that. But the point is that this all happened in 2021, and we had opportunistic politicians who got up in front of a nation who was aggrieved and outraged by the death of George Floyd, and they seized it. They did as much as possible to make that moment really about them. So you had city commissioners, county commissioners, leaders of agencies getting out in front of the camera and saying that we're going to make this change and I'm going to lead this charge so that you vote for me. Unfortunately, what they never took into account was the responsibility that they must have been taking on, because as we defund and demoralize and change the police, we still have crime, which is going to remain an ever constant in our lives. And so I wonder if they ever were aware that perhaps in the future, if a police department is dissolved, defund, demoralized, that they might play a part in ever growing crime that would have real victims. I mentioned some names at the start of the show. I showed their pictures. Brianna Long, she was working at a bar when she was shot by a stray bullet fired by a gang. Carl Morgan was a sous chef recently killed in New Orleans, who was killed during a carjacking while he was picking up his son at a daycare. Johnny Klein was someone who was in Minneapolis. She was shot and killed while withdrawing money to pay her bills at an ATM. Logan Tipton, a 6-year-old boy, someone broke into his house, a mentally ill person like DeCarlos Brown, and he was stabbed to death in his bed. Tiffany Sifuni, she was a pregnant mom in South Carolina. She was the victim of a hit and run. She was dragged by a car. And of course, who can forget Laken Riley, someone whose life could have been spared by a rigorous policy to protect our country from people who are illegal immigrants and gang members. And of course, Iryna Zarutska. So this is the policy of the past 5 years to defund the police, which is a real movement. And this is where we are 5 years later. We have victims that have some accountability for the people that victimize them, but politicians have skirted any kind of accountability for this. The defund movement went away. We realized quickly that it wasn't going to work. I'll play a video here shortly about refunding the police. But now we have dead victims who should have never died in the first place. Their deaths might have been preventable with a robust and supported police department, but all these politicians are mum on it, and no one stands to hold them to account for it, Drew.
It's about big party money and being reelected to maintain control. And it's so, let's not even talk about a black and a white issue. Because quite honestly, I've always felt that there are parts of a black community that are underserved and need more protection. But as soon as you start protecting or taking out the very small percentage of the criminals that are in those communities, you get hammered. You get hammered for over enforcement. You get hammered for making too many traffic stops. So we're always in this battle. But what happened was that there is a certain party in control that understands that people live on emotion. They don't live in rationality in their party. And they can pull at their heartstrings, particularly when you focus on a black and brown community. You keep telling them over and over that they're suppressed or oppressed. And you keep telling them over and over that the police are bad and that they need me, the politician, to fix it. And this is what happens. They just kowtow to every demand from the community that has to do with police are villains. And I don't know how else to explain it. I don't know how many times I've had to explain it. When there is a officer involved shooting, we have made great changes in the law enforcement industry. There's a genesis from the beginning of when we, from the beginnings of our show, where we would break down body cams and 911 calls. We've even seen the development of, oh, by the way, There's an independent body that now investigates that. There's more transparency. If there wasn't more transparency, we wouldn't have this much body cam. I think people are shocked by what they see on the body cams. And it's exactly how we predicted. So there have been positive strides because of the pressure that was given, but there's not been compromise. And what has happened, what is happening now is all of these kind of blue cities or these areas that were already in peril have become crime ridden, even though everyone's going to say, well, murders are down and crime is down. And there's a different
statistics are not being recorded properly.
They're not.
They're paper whipping the problem. Go ahead.
Right. But okay. Yeah, fine. Crime is down. Tell that to Iryna Zarutska's family. Tell that to Lake and Riley's family. Yeah, crime is down. But so now it's a matter of, we never really said defund the police. What we said was reallocate budgeting. And well, yeah, like an idiot, you said, let's reallocate budgeting. We'll send mental health professionals to these calls so cops with guns don't show up there. And what's the first thing that happened? Probably within a week, the first call, the mental health professional responded. The guy had a knife. They called the cops with the guns, who ended up having to shoot the guy. And you know what I mean? It's just, how about you just leave it to the professionals? And the thing is, anytime there's an officer involved shooting, the law enforcement agency cannot make a statement. They're not going to make a statement. They can't. They're doing what they can to appease the what's it called, John? The transparency demands.
The auditors and things like
that. The auditors and the community activists, they're doing what they can to make that statement, to get on camera and say, this was a shooting for sure, and we have an independent body looking into it. And so they do that. They try to release the body cam when they can, but you can't, as a law enforcement agency, do that. It's an active criminal investigation, whether there's a crime that occurred because of the officer's actions, or there's a crime that occurred prior to the officer taking action. Then there's a whole civil aspect to this that goes 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And the law enforcement agency is on the hook for all that and for every word they utter. So when you get up and you have a press conference and you try to explain what happened, and half the time social media doesn't care anyway. They just want the 3-second clip. And it goes both ways, John. The 3-second clip hurts us just as much as it helps us.
Right.
But because we have a lot of right-wing influencers who hate the police now too.
True.
The pendulum is swinging. So, look, I just don't know what to tell you. You're doing this at the detriment of your own safety. This is your police force.
Yeah. Let's go through the stuff with DeCarlo Brown Jr. specifically. I want to talk about him. Someone in our chats mentioned, how he got out when he has a list of arrests as long as your arm. Well, we're going to talk about that specifically. Here's a list of some of the things that was going on with DeCarlo Brown Jr. Going back as far as 2007, he had arrests for simple assault, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest from police officers. He stepped up his game by 2013 and 2014. He was involved in an armed robbery. Now he's a felon. He was actually charged with felon in possession of a firearm. So here's all your gun laws, everything that's designed to protect the community. As we all have said many times before, it doesn't actually do anything for protecting the community when a felon can just go out and get a firearm. And it doesn't matter how illegal or difficult you make that, he's still going to count his way onto one. All time, he has 14 arrests, some of which are for larceny and threats and other things that make him a dangerous person. But now he's charged with the first-degree murder of Iryna Zarutska, a story that all too briefly captured the attention of this country because of what it means to be a woman in this country, a victim of a crime in this country. Certainly, it's a sad story that she fled wartime violence in Ukraine. She was just 23. She came over here. She worked with animals. She worked at a pizzeria. She was just trying to get out of danger that's in Ukraine. And of course, she finds as much or more danger on a train in North Carolina, which is supposed to be a safe place. And so his charges also included recently misuse of 911 and a domestic violence case in which he assaulted his own sister. So this is a guy that beats up his family, and he called 911 saying that he was being controlled by man-made substances in his body. And he was actually charged with a class 1 misdemeanor, which is the higher of 2 misdemeanors, which is usually something that you would do less than a year in jail for. I will tell you as a 911 dispatcher that actually being charged and going to court on misuse of 911 means he was really misusing the hell out of 911.
Yes.
Because every day, people dial 911 for the wrong reason. We get crazy calls. We get calls from people who are malicious, and it's usually not worth it to us to go ahead and charge them and drag them through the taxpayer expense of trying to convince them to no longer call 911 and abuse us. So when DeCarlos Brown was misusing 911, this was not a trivial thing. As I said, it was a class 1 misdemeanor, which is the higher of the 2 misdemeanors, but they were going forward with that. Well, a judge released him in January on a promissory note, basically making him sign a note saying he would promise to appear before a court, and then this could all be adjudicated at some time. So there's no bail for him. Now, here's something that we're going to have to talk about, Drew, because he was not a felon. Well, he's a felon. He's a lifetime felon, but he was not being charged with a felony at the time when a judge let him out. So we have to discuss that, because a lot of people are reacting to this with disgust, saying this guy was a lifetime loser, a dangerous felon. How dare a judge just let him out without any bond? Well, I'm here to tell you that someone committing a high misdemeanor and then being released without bond is extremely common. I'm sure that's how it is there.
Oh, yeah.
That's how it is here. So we're actually not looking at an uncommon situation. However, if you do want to talk about the judge who let him out, we'll go ahead and talk about Judge Teresa A. Stokes. She's a magistrate judge there in Charlottesville. She released Brown on a written promise to appear in January for that misuse of 911, that class 1 misdemeanor, which is, like I said, very normal. So here's something about judges, magistrate judges in North Carolina. Here's how they work for everyone who wants her impeached or recalled or whatever. You need to understand magistrate judges are appointed. This is by state statute in North Carolina. They're not elected. And here's the pisser, Drew. I wonder how common this is. Perhaps it's more common. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the case in my area just because we have a low population here. But in North Carolina, judges are not even required to be licensed attorneys or to have a law degree. You would think that it would be nothing but lawyers jockeying for that position. You'd think being a judge is sort of the capstone of a legal career. Anyone who is a lawyer would want to become one, but apparently it's just not even a requirement. The statute allows appointment if they meet certain educational or experience criteria. This is all according to a statement that was released by Congressman Tim Moore. I'll go ahead and throw that on the screen, but he's calling for the removal of the judge who freed the suspect prior to the Charlotte Light rail murder. So that's your source on that, but he's calling for her to be removed. Just so you're clear that she doesn't need to have a law degree or be a lawyer. But good news for those of you who are worried about that, she did attend Cooley Law College in Michigan, dubbed the worst law school in America, or according to Above the Law newsletter in 2017.
Yeah, they've spread. They're based in Michigan, but they've actually spread out. There's a campus in southern Hillsborough County. Right.
Well, don't go there, Drew. One of the lowest first-time bar pass rates among the American Bar Association. Just 37.25% of their graduates managed to pass the bar. There is a standard for law colleges that in the first 2 years of graduation, you must have at least 75% of their students pass the bar. This college, Cooley Law College, failed to meet that, and they've been on sort of an academic probation since then. So although we didn't need to have someone with a law degree, we did happen to get one. She just got one from the worst law school in America. So doesn't Charlotte deserve better? How did we actually get Judge Teresa A. Stokes if she was appointed to this position? Well, she was appointed to this position by Judge Carla Archie. Judge Carla Archie is the senior resident Superior Court judge. She appointed Stokes to a 2-year term in 2023. That's according to nccourts.gov, if you doubt me. So this judge that supervises or oversees the law in Charlotte, and Judge Stokes, She used to be a chief assistant district attorney, the prosecutor's office. She would charge felony drug possession cases until she went private. She went to Wachovia and Wells Fargo, where she chaired diversity and inclusion committees. She worked for the North Carolina State Lottery Diversity Program. It's very important that the lottery be diverse, Drew. And of course, her crowning achievement as a judge is the 2019 Diversity Champion Award winner. Fortunately, I could not find any data on whether or not her prosecutorial career was worth a damn. There was no data available as to whether or not she was actually putting criminals behind bars. But we cannot blame judges for this. They are beyond any kind of recall, scrutiny, or liability for the criminals that they set free back into our society for the damages that they cause. Let's talk about Charlotte PD, who's being blamed for this. Now, those of you who doubted whether or not the defund movement was a figurative movement, a social movement to defund the police, I've got the numbers here for you. Going back to 2019, they had an operating budget of a little over $17 million. That actually dipped down in 2021 at the height of the defund movement, but it only dropped by 1.02%. So, Drew, when I look at these numbers, what I see is that they made a small reduction in their budget, enough to appease people, the transparency people, the people who are out there marching. They could say, hey, we actually made our budget for the police department smaller, while at the same time they could appease conservatives and law and order types by saying, yeah, we made it smaller, but it's only 1% smaller. However, if you look at the numbers and if you look at inflation during these incredible Joe Biden economy years, you're going to see that their budget grew 8.9% from 2019 to 2022, but inflation rose at 14.5%. So what this means in terms of real dollars and what their budget actually buys in terms of cop hours on the streets is that they are now spending in 2022 4.9 less than they did in 2019. So the budget did indeed go down, especially when you account for inflation. They did not keep up with the shrinking value of the dollar. And from the bottom line, they took money off of the budget in 2021. But you know what? Money's not everything. You know, they did increase pay for officers. However, policies at Charlotte PD have caused serious problems. Here's an article from the Charlotte Observer. If you guys don't like statistics and you like anecdotal evidence, this is an article from 2023. Officer shortage, part of slower 911 police response in Charlotte. One phrase is becoming increasingly common to hear in Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officers' radios. The phrase, no units are available, is heard so often it is similar to when officers use the phrase 10-4, according to the Fraternal Order of Police, Daniel Redford. No units available is another way of saying 911 dispatch cannot send police officers right away, either to respond to a call or when officers call for backup assistance at a crime scene. So there are no police officers. They're experiencing significant shortages there. And we'll talk about some of the reasons for those shortages. But at a recent Charlotte City Council meeting, Redford, who is also an officer, says he hears the phrase on the radio from other officers almost daily. So let's talk about these vacancies. What are the actual numbers? Well, they have about 1,937 budgeted positions. That all depends on, again, you could paper whip a problem and move duties around and move hours around and change the number of part-time employees you have and full-time employees you have. But still, going back to before all of this insanity, before all this nonsense, in 2018, they had a vacancy rate of about 170 officers. That increased in 2019 to 181. So problems are beginning. In 2020, Drew, they were missing over 200 officers. And I would hate to speculate that some of those police officers were probably laid off for certain choices they were making about their own health. I don't know that for sure. So I would hate to speculate.
Yeah.
2021, they were still missing 188 officers. And by 2024, 304 vacancies exist. Drew, talk to us a little bit about what's happened in policing. You're one of those police officers who hit the bricks and said, I've had enough of this. You literally stood at a river and threw your star into it, like at the end of that Dirty Harry movie.
Like Muhammad Ali did with his gold medal.
Police officers who walked away.
Like Muhammad Ali did with his gold medal. I left in 2021. It's it does probably, I'm willing to wager if you look across the country, a lot of vacancies opened up in 2022 because a lot of us left in 2021 because we got tired of the bullshit. We got tired of being told how horrible and racist we were. We got tired of the it was the vaccination issue. If anything, and I've always said this on the vaccination issue, look, cops, first responders, medics, emergency room personnel, we all understand more than any other part of the population risk. We understand risk versus not necessarily risk versus reward, but like we understand precautionary measures and risk and life and death. I really think that should have been a decision that you took away. Like you didn't need to start firing people over that. But at any rate, it happened. And to this day, we're told that, no budgets were really slashed. You guys are just kind of making this defund the police. I question whether this really occurred. Well, here's your numbers. I mean, here's your cold hard facts. And you're right. Even if the budgets didn't increase, the manning went down and the numbers either stay the same or only slightly increased, but it didn't outpace inflation. So there was money allocated somewhere else. It wasn't dumped into policing because the people that approved those budgets didn't want to have to justify that they were doing that. Okay, fine. But this is what you get. This is exactly what you get. Now, I do want to clear a couple things up. I'm always one to tell the truth, even though people think I'm crazy or think I'm lying. And I'll be real honest with you. This guy being let out on a promissory note, he's released on his own recognizance, a signature bond on a misdemeanor, doesn't shock me at all, even with his criminal history, because when you look at his criminal history and then you have probably a public defender or some kind of defense attorney like Alan Jackson standing up there saying, look, the guy's just mentally ill. I mean, like he called 911 40 times. Obviously there's a mental illness there, Judge. And the judge is like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to be labeled Judge Cannoni. Let me just sign this thing and send him out on his own signature. That doesn't shock me. That's how the public perceives, the heroes of the defense attorneys and the villains that are judges. So in the interest of fairness, she let him out on a misdemeanor on his own signature that she would have let a first-time offender out on. Whether his criminal history was taken into account, it's kind of different. But there are two things that they're going to consider: are they a flight risk, and what is their danger to the community based on the charge? And when they look down at the danger to the community based on the charge, and all he's doing is calling 911, they're going to let him out. Right. It's going to cost John, you would have the breakdown. I mean, it's probably going to cost $150 or $200 a day to keep them.
Conservatively, that's how much it would cost. Probably sure. At a place like Charlotte, it'd probably be like $300 a day.
So $300 a day to keep them in a pretrial hold in a jail, in a local county jail. And the only benefit would be, and this leads to my next point, would be that he'd probably be getting the mental health services that he needed. But that's questionable because those resources are spread very thin, especially in a jail setting like that. And on top of that, I did see in the comments, like, why would they let, someone like that out? And, I explained the criminal part and they were right in saying, when these people stay on their meds, they're generally fine. Well, here's the thing. Mental illness isn't a crime. So even when people call, even when families call and they say, look, my uncle, he's roaming the streets, he's having a psychotic episode, and okay, is he committing a crime? Well, no, I'm really worried about him because he's done this before. Look, I'm worried about him too. I'll be real honest with you. But if he's not taking his meds and he's roaming the street, he's not committing a crime. It's not a crime to be paranoid or delusional or not take your medications. If it's severe enough, you can be committed for that. But these cases aren't always
for a 24-hour hold until a doctor says he's fine.
Yeah, generally.
The first 24 hours subsequent to release, his agitation and psychological state's actually more dangerous than before he went in.
Yeah. So, and it's hard enough to get them to take their medications anyway, because they believe. So this guy even believed that he was being poisoned by
He
his own
stopped
body.
taking
I
his
mean,
meds. He did, right.
like, how are you going to convince, like, put it in peanut butter and like, here comes the airplane,
Well, treat, right.
like, what do you think you're like? He's not going to take his meds. I mean, so, I am by no way justifying his behavior. It's shocking and it's horrible, and you already know where I stand on all this. And now his mental health has led him to have to answer to a criminal court. And there's going to be even more outrage if they make the case that he was mentally ill at the time he did the stabbing.
I'm worried that's what's going to happen, right? Or that at least
probably
he
going to
won't
end
be
up
eligible
happening
for the death penalty for that reason.
Yeah. So, look, is it really just a broken system? Is it, or is it maybe just a broken mental health system? And it's not necessarily like, it's not the cops' fault. And in this case, I see your argument. Not even argument. I see your, you've laid out the perfect case of, there are a lot of flavors of diversity threaded into this Afghan that we've just laid on everybody, into the quilt we just secured everybody with. But realistically, any judge probably would have made that same decision.
Right. I don't think that her decision was unusual, but I think there's a greater question being asked by a lot of people who are outside the criminal justice system is, was this normal? Was this average? Was this behavior we can expect from a judge? And a lot of people who are really outraged will demand for a higher level of accountability and even liability by judges. But one thing I want to say about DeCarlos Brown Jr., just to play devil's advocate for the sake of this judge, although I'm not a fan, DeCarlos Brown Jr. is not happening in a vacuum. Do you have any idea how many DeCarlos Brown Jr.'s that magistrate probably saw every week? Is she supposed to make the decision that every single one of these who's committed a class 1 misdemeanor, a low crime, it's not even a felony, that each one of these is supposed to be going to jail until their adjudication of their crime, which could be months later on the calendar? I mean, the jail is going to be full. One thing that we saw in this guy's criminal history is that he went to jail for armed robbery. He went to prison for armed robbery in 2015. And then I don't know how long you do for armed robbery in North Carolina, but he was let out in 2020. That's an example of a probable policy where, based off of his behavior, parole, other factors, that because of COVID and because we were attempting to completely empty out our jails and prisons at that time, he might have been released early back in 2020. I can remember 2020. I remember we would find guys asleep behind the wheel of cars, completely drunk. They were already DUI. The keys would be in the car. They would have outstanding warrants. We would say 10-8 because nobody was going to jail for anything. And now, we can't simply lock everyone away, as much as I am personally in favor of that, because I believe that people like Iryna Zarutska deserve to be free of crime. People have the right to not be attacked on a train. They have a right to not be murdered. They have a right to walk about their communities without that having actually be an expectation. But that's what the police are for, because we can't keep everyone in prison. And how are we supposed to keep anyone employed as the police? I want you guys to take a look at this guy. His name is Rowan County Commissioner Craig Pierce. He pled guilty to driving while impaired. He was given a 60-day suspended sentence, unsupervised probation, ordered to surrender his driver's license, be subject to substance abuse assessment. So he got, pretty rigorous sentencing. But while he was being taken into custody and he was failing his field sobriety examinations and going back to the station, he was threatening law enforcement. He was saying that because of the way they did their job, that they could expect their jobs to cease to exist, that he would vote to defund the police. He didn't even know who he was talking to. He said he would defund the sheriff's department to a city police officer. Now, this is what you're supposed to be getting from the people that are supporting you. These are the people that control the purse strings on your job. And this is as good as it gets from your upper level of your management saying that we're going to get rid of your job. Even if the whole public's not against you and the late night comedians and the talking heads and the pundits and CNN isn't out there calling for your blood and calling for your job, you're not getting support at any level. And if you have a family to raise and you don't want to go to prison for the rest of your life like Derek Chauvin, or face that same prospect as someone like Darby or Mistretta did, or some of the other people we've talked about in the show, you're going to get out of policing, because why lay your life and your pension on the line when there is nobody that will go to bat for you, Drew?
I'm trying to find the article where the father freaked out on the senator for misusing the name. What happened was there was a House committee or a Judiciary committee, and they were talking about several murders recently that had happened because of either cash bail reform or letting people out early. And there was just one, just typical like virtue signal. She probably had somebody write the copy for her, like, sir, I want, like, your daughter was da 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 da. And she was referring to Iryna
Zarutska.
Thank you. My lights keep going out, but that's who he was referring to. That's who she was referring to, but he was the father of some other victim who had been let out. I'm sorry, who had been murdered by somebody who had been let out after committing like 30 some odd felonies, just like a career criminal. And then you couple that with the Seattle mayor just the other day, in his press conference, where he's like, look, I'm willing to have this conversation. Why is the guy a 30-time convicted criminal? Did we charge him too many times? Like, look, we're missing, like, I see your point. Is there a social reason behind it? Is there an issue behind why, like, is he stealing bread because he's hungry and we
That's
convict
not
him?
what's happening.
But it's not what's happening.
And I get tired of that old, everyone like treating all these people, someone who stabbed Iryna Zarutska. That's not Aladdin. Okay. We all need to grow up and stop pretending that that's the situation that's going on. But the politicians, they want to capture the emotions. They want to capture the empathy and the empathetic, and they want to say that we need restorative justice. We need to reform the system, and we need to have compassion and empathy for these people rather than locking them up at the prison. I can remember going back to college and saying that warehousing people simply doesn't work. There's no rehabilitation. The recidivism rate is really high. I'm sorry. I'm past that. Iryna Zarutska is dead, and she wouldn't be if we kept the person who killed her inside a box. I know that that's not the most humane, it's not the most empathetic, but at least Iryna would be alive. Drew, I have to say that your hotel room isn't that nice if, like a truck stop bathroom, when you stop moving around, the light turns off. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play the results of the defund movement. Certainly we have Iryna Zarutska and some of these other victims that I already talked about. But to prove that it really happened, let's talk about the Refund the Police movement.
And 9 people in San Francisco facing felony charges for those smash and grabs we told you about earlier this week. The city's district attorney says 5 of the people were arrested in connection with a mob that robbed a Louis Vuitton store there on Friday. Witnesses say a pack of people stormed the store and essentially emptied it out. The DA says the robberies aren't just petty thefts, but outrageous and offensive crimes.
By the way, you cannot get a loaf of bread from a Louis Vuitton store.
Cops say they believe these smash and grabs are part of sophisticated criminal networks. People steal as much as they can and then just sell it online. Just this weekend, police say looters robbed and vandalized several other stores in the Bay Area. The DA said he expects more arrests to come.
This is a culture of lawlessness that we promoted, and it reached its height in 2021.
Another deadly shooting in Philadelphia last night. The city's homicide total this year now just one shy of 500. That's the record high set back in 1990. Today, Philly's mayor saying getting violence under control is his top priority.
It's terrible to every morning get up and to have to look at the numbers and look at the news and see the stories. It's just craziness. It's just crazy.
He doesn't have any answers, and look at who's standing behind him.
Stop.
Right. Other cities across the country also reporting a sharp rise in murder rates. In LA, data shows homicides are up 14% from last year.
Now, Los Angeles has had the lowest murder rate in something like, what, 60 years because of aggressive ICE enforcement?
And up 45% from 2019. The police commission there now working to increase funding for the force. LA is the latest city trying to refund the police after the defund movement gained traction last year. Chris Burbank now, former Salt Lake City police chief, now a vice president of law.
Get ready to have your mind rocked by this insane person who was the former chief of police of Salt Lake City.
Law enforcement strategy for the Center for Policing Equity. Chris, thanks.
By the way, the fact that there's a Center for Policing Equity shows you that there's something seriously wrong. Defund that right away. I hope that doesn't still exist.
Cities went from defund to refund pretty quick. What do you make of the shift we're seeing?
Well, a lot of it is the misunderstanding that we all have, including police leadership, that the actions of the police actually have that much influence on crime. There are things such as education, access to healthcare that have much more significant impact on crime and alternatives to incarceration as opposed to the activities that police engage in on a daily basis.
Drew.
Okay.
I knew this was going to activate you.
Yeah, I see what he's saying. I do. I've always been a high level or look at it from a higher level problem solving aspect that, yeah, maybe it is low education. Maybe in certain areas they don't have access to proper nutrition because they don't have the right supermarket in their neighborhood. And that leads to them falling asleep in class, which leads to them failing or falling behind in their studies, which leads to...
We got student lunch programs, Drew.
No, I understand all that. So yeah, maybe there is a bigger problem. Here's the deal though. The first entry, the criminal justice system, you don't get into the criminal justice system without the police. The police are out there enforcing laws, all part of the checks and balances system. The legislation comes down, the government in the form of the police goes and enforces those laws. If you've broken the law, you have to answer to it. And so the entry into the criminal justice system is law enforcement. The reason behind them committing the crime is a different issue and should be addressed. But this is not like, you can't just throw your hands up and say, no, this isn't a policing issue. Like we can't, we have some way of like turning the tap on and turning the tap off of who we arrest. Look, this didn't work in California when they started, the education system started to realize that there were too many black students, black and brown students, as they always like to say, were being suspended from school. So their answer was, let's stop suspending black and brown kids. You know, they didn't have a problem suspending anybody else, but if it's a black or brown kid, you're going to give them a pass. And what do you think happens when that kid turns 13, 15, 18, 20, 21? He's getting the same pass because it's the same people with the same mindset that are doing that. There's no correction. If you want to look at big picture issues, this is where Charlie Kirk would always, this is what Charlie Kirk always talked about too. Like, it's the family. It's fatherless homes. It's the government encouraging fatherless homes.
And sometimes it is their father because their father has a rap sheet too.
Sure, but which means he's probably not present, or he's a bad example. You know what I mean? So yeah, there are greater social issues, but to say that
my point is that it's bigger than a fatherless issue. It's part of a culture that glorifies crime.
Yeah. Yes, I'll agree with you, but I think it's partially because the local government, or maybe even the federal government, glorifies the fact that it's being glorified. In other words, they're enabling. They're just keeping up with social programs that don't address the issue. Social programs such as, well, we'll just stop. I know how to fix this problem. We'll just stop suspending the kid. Like, that's not fixed. That's fixing the number. That's not fixing the issue.
It's paper whipping it, like how we're solving all of our crime statistics now. But I can remember them doing that even in Virginia about small things. Like there was real questions raised about the educational system. It seems like we didn't have a lot of students who were passing the SATs with very high scores. The scores went up as soon as people of a certain community stopped taking those tests, Drew.
Like, this is not, it's still not solving anything. I understand exactly what you mean. And that's, so you eliminated them from taking the test, and now all of a sudden the
average went up, right?
This is, this is the age old, and again, I'm trying, I don't want to invoke Charlie Kirk's name again, but like where he's saying, okay, well, Asians went through a period of oppression, repression. They were put in camps, and their Asians are the most successful culture when it comes to
their
finances.
Test scores outpace Caucasian people. It's just true.
If you ever wanted to look or read or watch the teachings of Chad O. Jackson, he's a brilliant guy. He's a documentarian, but he's mainly a plumber. He owns a plumbing company. He's a blue collar guy, but he's on YouTube. He's brilliant. Talks about, some very controversial things, like, how Dr. King was actually a Marxist. He wasn't really in it for civil rights. He was in it for equity, meaning we got to take money from the white people and give it to our community to make it level.
He also liked stepping out on his wife and being able to do that all across the country.
Yeah, and orgies and all kinds of stuff. But so there's this whole mindset that no, we got to make it equitable. We got to make it equitable. Well, no, the way we make it equitable is like, stop pretending they're children. Let's how about we just like let everybody be an adult? And I've always said, like, I have friends from high school. I grew up in a very liberal area that hasn't changed, by the way. I'm 50 whatever years old. It's still the same. They had a Republican mayor for 4 years out of the 50 of my life, and 50 whatever of my life. And it's terrible there. I wish I could tell you that my hometown was thriving, but it's not. It's a shithole. And it's overrun by gangs, and it's outside of Buffalo. Buffalo is, it's having its moment of revival around the water and stuff, but well, they're having problems too. I mean, like maybe not as bad as it used to be, but
same as my hometown.
Yeah, bad news. It's the whole thing, but it's always like the Democrat-run cities. And believe me, I understand that Democrats need Republicans because
they need a bad guy. They need someone to threaten the population with. If you don't vote for us, the villains are going to come here.
If there wasn't any fiscal conservatism injected into the conversation, all the money would be gone. Like it
is gone. These cities are broke.
Yeah, we'd just be taxing and taxing and taxing and taxing and taxing. And then conversely, there are some Republicans that are so cruel that they just don't sometimes see the forest for the trees, and they kind of need every once in a while to hear the social aspect of.
Put me down as cruel. I'm signing up for cruel now.
I got it. I understand. It's just like,
I guess when I watched the video of Iryna Zarutska, my empathy for these people of all different kinds, but the culture of lawlessness. Okay, so I'm not talking about a race of people. I'm talking about people that live their entire lives. They call it the life. They live this way and they die this way, and they have no respect for the law, and they're constantly not having a job, not having an integrated nuclear family, not having respect for any of our Western society, law and order, cultural norms. Their power that comes from the family is completely broken down and usurped by the state. They want their welfare. They want their Section 8 housing. They want their food stamps. And the state wants that to remain the case. No one ever shoots at Santa Claus, and the state wants to remain Santa Claus because that's how they stay in power. Why are you going to vote for a Republican when he's going to cancel your food stamps, when he's going to take away your Medicaid? You need to vote for me, and I'll continue to take care of you. And the people that want to be taken care of more than they want to be safe, and they keep voting in these politicians decade after decade. A city like Detroit, A state like California, these Democrat strongholds that have been that way for decades and decades and decades, if the policies of the left and of that side of the political argument were durable, or if they were cohesive, if they were logical, if they were congruent with human nature, these places would be paradise. However, Detroit, California are amongst the shittiest shitholes in this country. The proof is in the pudding, where the rubber meets the road, and that's just how it is. I'm not saying that Republican places don't have their own problems. There's always going to be problems everywhere. But in a place where you can take as a complete test environment, say Detroit, what kind of environment do you have there? And yet you go out to the people there and you ask them about their society and the gangs and the violence. They decry all these things on camera. But then when you ask them, would you ever vote for a Republican? Do you believe they could change things? And all they do is go down the normal line of everything that they've ever heard badly about Republicans. And they continue to vote for all the people that encourage the destruction of their social fabric and their neighborhoods to maintain their power. And it makes me sick, because the rich and the wealthy exploit and undermine these families, these real human beings. And they set up people like Iryna Zarutska to be met with violence on a train. And she's far from the only one. She's just the most dramatic case. And it will keep continuing as long as people put their own ambition and their own power above the needs of their constituency. Drew.
Yeah, this is, just the greater conversation. I wish we weren't in a world where we could actually see a murder so quickly and so violently. You know what I mean? Like
we all had a Zapruder film when it came to Charlie Kirk.
Yeah,
all of us had that within moments.
I'm referring to that. I'm referring to Iryna. But what is it doing to the kids that are watching? Like, is it desensitizing them? So
is there any sense left?
Is there any sense left? So what that to me translates to, and this is just the sociologist hat I'm wearing, what that desensitization means, that, or could mean, because I haven't tested the theory, but if they don't care about death, if it's like so common, if it's on social media, and society is only going to get more violent and more violent and more violent. And if you've got less good guys, and you're flooding the country with bad guys, and you're preventing the good guys from, getting the illegal people out of here, whether they're great and holy and humble and contributing members of society,
Trender Agua, who will stalk people and beat them,
kill them
while they're jogging.
Yeah, and cut out their tongue or whatever. But I'm just saying, like, when you get in the way of that, when you get in the way of enforcement, this is what it leads to. This is exactly what it leads to. And it creates
a world that nobody wants to save anymore.
Nobody wants to have this. Everybody
wants to go out there and lay their life on the line for a community that fears and hates them.
Right. Nobody wants to have the conversation, because everybody says they want a conversation, but as soon as you bring up these points, it turns emotional and it's shut down.
Or done. That you might have to think or do something differently than you've ever done before, or that you might have to undermine the status quo in our political infrastructure that gave all the people who have all the power and all the money that they have now. God forbid we make a different decision. And I mean that on all sides, because our country is so deeply divided and we're so entrenched against each other. Never mind the fact that somebody like me, I'm going to go out and vote for Donald Trump. I've got nothing in common with Donald Trump. I've got more in common with my neighbor across the street, who is a hippie communist liberal guy. I've got more in common with him than I do with Donald Trump. And he has more in common with me than he does with Kamala Harris. But the big powers on both sides of the argument want to keep neighbors, friends, and families divided, looking at each other with suspicion, fear, and hatred, projecting all of our stuff, all these emotions, all this anger, all this outrage that we get fed back to us by social media, projecting it on each other so that we don't keep our eyes on the people who are perpetuating the problems in our society.
Exactly.
Really good. I've said that very well. Let's go back to this nutcase from Salt Lake City one last time, because this is your modern chief police administrator, and this is what he thinks about policing.
Doesn't the move to refund the police suggest the public isn't buying that?
Well, the challenge that you have is we don't understand, right? We fell into this movement of defund the police. Well, we prefer redesign the police. Let's start looking at the actions and saying, do they contribute to the outcome that we want, which is reduce crime, reduce incarceration, reduce interactions with the police, and reduce violence?
I do not want to reduce incarceration.
Look, he's I get what he's saying again, but he's so far off the mark, because what it is it's an assumption. Everybody is so focused or is so programmed right now that it's got to either be A or it's got to be B. It can never be C, which is the actual truth. So it's either got to be the criminals are really bad or the cops are really bad. It can never be like a blend. So he's like making the assumption that the cops are really bad, and we need to reimagine this and figure out what we're doing wrong. What if we're not doing anything wrong? I mean,
what if we're not contributing to the fact that some people wake up every day and they choose violence? They choose to go past a bad check. They choose
it's got nothing to do with
all their fentanyl rather than take a PCS charge.
Right. Or pass bad checks, or
right.
Or fake money. Yeah, go
ahead. Also, who doesn't wear a tie on CNBC? Come on, dude.
If not, we need to stop engaging in that activity. We have been very poor at measuring the outcome of policing based on the actions of policing.
You know, policing is one part of this. What about the court system as well? Do prosecutors need to get more aggressive in pursuing charges?
Well, we always want to punish people, right? And the deterrent, the act of punishment, has really not changed the outcome in our society for 100 years.
Because we're not punishing them.
Right? This is the death penalty argument. I mean, we can go down the road of a bunch of different places, but catching people after the fact, after they've committed the crime, and punishing them has not solved our problem. The goal of law enforcement, at least in my mind, should be to prevent disorder from occurring, not catch it after the fact.
How are you going to do that when you're down 300 officers, Drew?
If more cops meant that crime was lower in recent years and fewer cops has led to a spike in crime, what other conclusion are people supposed to draw?
Well, you're looking only at the last moment in time. If you look historically, right, when we had an economic crisis a number of years ago, we had 30,000 fewer police officers on the street than the year before, and violent crime plummeted. So the correlation, right, we're quick to jump when it's right there in front of us and we have this need for a 24-hour, minute-by-minute update. But let's look at a little historical viewpoint and say, is it actually the actions of police that are driving the outcome?
You just blame police for upticks in crime. Now, there's a difference between 2020 and 2009. The difference was that in 2009, you had Barack Obama as president, and we weren't going to blame him for stuff that was going on. It was all these subprime mortgages and all this. The difference is in 2020, we had a pandemic where we were laying off police officers for making their own healthcare decisions, and we had the absolute agitation, both politically and through the media, of the George Floyd problem, which put police into crosshairs. The Defund the Police movement of 2020 was not similar to an employment crisis in 2009. Those are two functionally different things. And for him to just say, well, we had a bunch of police officers laid off in 2009 and we didn't see a spike in crime. Well, those two things could not have been more different in terms of the reasons why those police officers were gone. We had a culture of violence being encouraged actively every night on the news. You were seeing people out there looting Target, you know, living the life that George Floyd himself could have only lived had he not been snuffed out, rejoicing in the lifestyle of George Floyd, I guess to protest for whatever reason. Target had it coming. Those are two completely different things, Drew.
I understand we're not going to arrest our way out of any situation. The goal of law enforcement is not preventative, it's to restore order. And restoration is an after the fact situation. It's he's putting the prevention on law enforcement. There is a level of crime prevention that goes on in law enforcement.
You're going to make every single cop an intelligence officer, though?
But right. So, and on top of that, like, this gets back to the social issue. Like, yeah, there are but that's not a cop issue. The social issues are not cop issues. We're dealing with acute emergencies. So no, we're not going to arrest our way out of this situation. I understand that, but there's no punishment element if you're not punishing people. one. And two, he's talking about, well, you know, it's such a knee jerk this or whatever. He's kind of alluding to this, like, we don't look at the long term. Yet he is the vice president of the Center for Equity in Policing that was on a 2021 interview. So you're going to tell me that when was that organization formed? I mean, I don't know. I could be eating my words here. That may have been formed in the early 1900s. I doubt it. I think that was probably a knee-jerk thing. But again, it's all because we're getting so much pressure from the citizens. I have no problem whatsoever looking at every situation, every police use of force, or and making sure that it wasn't us. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Cops in general want to get it right. There are a bunch that just want to go out and, you know, beat people up or whatever. I mean, like, I don't mean that in the like in the proactive sense. I mean that in the like, we should just be kicking the doors in, and we should be like, no, you've got to slow down. You've got
as
to
long as you have the Constitution protecting people.
Yeah, you've got to respect people's constitutional rights.
I mean, let's just go full insane. Let's say we've got a pre-crime division. We've got these precogs, and we're going to go out and police people's thoughts. Someone with murderous intent, we're going to go pick them up. That's the kind of proactive diffusing of incidents before they happen. And it's not constitutional. It's false arrest. You cannot go out there and arrest someone and charge them for a crime they haven't committed yet. The entire criminal justice system is reactionary in nature. Not only that, but a typical shift is reactive in nature. You can have proactive cops go out there, and you can have them in the schools, you can have them at the libraries, you can put them on bike patrol and make them highly visible. You can put them at the busiest intersection in town with lights and sirens on all day like a bat signal, letting them know that the police are out there. But 911's still going to ring when a man picks up his fist or a knife and raises it to his wife. We can't prevent that thing. We can't restrict that. And until we know people's thoughts and until we police their thoughts, which will never happen, we're never going to be able to prevent crime.
I want to address this comment here that says that there needs to be better screening or education for police.
Well, that requires money, doesn't it?
Well, how about
Training's
this?
The first thing to go when you defund the police.
Okay. Slow down for a second.
Too mad, Drew.
If I were to give you my training over the 30 or 29 years that the folder of all the certificates that I've had of training, of every knee-jerk reaction, of every, it doesn't fit in one binder. Training is not necessarily the issue. The education standards were raised when I was before I was hired. Right before I was hired, you needed a 2-year degree. Then you needed a bachelor's degree. Let me tell you just an example. One small example, one agency where I worked. I worked in the training division for, I don't know, the better part of 2.5 years. We were putting through 30 cops at a time through our academies, through our sheriff's orientation program. There were about 10,000 applicants that were whittled down to 30 successful applicants that made it through, that would make it through the entire hiring process. And of those, 26, 27 would make it all the way to the field training phase a year later. And then the 6 or 8 month period of field training, 2 or 3 of those would wash out. And in the meantime, the attrition is like still through the roof. So even if we're putting 90 cops through a year, you're still retiring 140 or losing them to death, or you're losing them to bad health, or whatever.
And nobody wants this job except for people who are underqualified.
That was my point. That was the overarching part of this.
Right.
And so now we needed better screening, and we need all this education, and we need all this training, this mysterious, like, oh no, they need better training. Better training in what? Every single year I got, not only did I get bias-based police training, I taught it. I had to teach it every year. It was mandated by FDLE in like 98, 97 or 98, like that long ago. Every year I had to go to the range and qualify. Every year, like, you have no idea how much training it takes to be a police officer. I hear this stupid comparison about it takes longer to be a chef or a barber, and bullshit. Don't give me that. You get trained as a chef or a barber once, and that's it. You get trained as a cop in a 16-week academy, and it goes on for the rest of your life because case law changes for the rest of your life, all this other stuff. Training in all this, like, oh no, there needs to be better screening. And if you saw the rigors of our recruitment and screening section. So now what that's led to, John, is people left the profession in waves because you got people,
the good cops left.
Yeah, and you have people looking down their nose saying that this is how you fix the problem. Here's the problem right here. You just need to fix it by doing this. And we're like, okay, you can have it. So what that causes is a greater gap in people not wanting to be cops. And guess what happens when that happens? The standards become lower.
Yep.
So now at the agency where I used to work, there's no longer a college education requirement. You can substitute military time for that. Or if you have experience in law enforcement somewhere else and you somehow ducked under the radar at another agency, you don't need a college degree anymore. You don't need critical thinking skills. So I don't want to hear that they need to be more trained or they need to be better educated. We've tried that. And everybody knows how to do a cop's job better than any cop. This whole channel will prove that for you, but that's not necessarily the case. It's a very common refrain, but it's not always true. And it's not, and by the way, in fairness, it's not that way in every city in America, but most of the progressive cities or most of the large cities, especially in the blue states, I think you will find that's exactly what happens. That the exact same thing happened. Like there was an education requirement. It was taken away because now we can't get qualified people. There was a tattoo prohibition for for a number of years where I worked. They took that away. Like now they can wear beards. Like they keep lowering the standards. There is no more of a glaring example than what happened in was it Memphis? Where was that? That guy was beat. I can't remember.
Nichols, that's the guy I mentioned. So that if you look at the timing of that was what, right after we came on board. So that would have been 2023, I believe. So right, all the police officers were gone, and they hired these 5 guys who definitely did not belong on that police department. And all of a sudden they're handling a guy like Tyre Nichols. And what happened? We demanded better police. We demanded that we get rid of the police and change everything. So all of a sudden the good police left the profession, and we hired these 5 guys who beat the shit out of Tyre Nichols. And that's exactly what's going to keep continuing to happen as you are inevitably lowering standards, because what person wants to be in this job? Like, we've got somebody in the chat tonight who's doing this job. He's talking about how all his mandatory training is currently on pause. I'm sure it's due to vacancies. We can't have cops going out and getting more training on how to be more sensitive and more caring and how to deal with people in mental health crisis because they're constantly on the line. We can't take guys off the line for in-service training because of the vacancies. And right. No one wants to do this job because of the policies, the procedures, the lack of support from politicians, the lack of support from citizens, and just the fact that no matter what, even if you do everything right, and even if you are, when you're in the police academy and you study your case law, the professor, a good professor will tell you, this is the case law, and he'll tell you all about when you can shoot and not shoot. But he's just like, but whatever, they'll still prosecute you anyway. It doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't matter if Graham v. Connor is in effect and they don't have to point the weapon at you for you to be cleared to shoot, because some opportunistic attorney general or prosecutor is just going to cut his teeth on your entire life. So good luck with that, buddy. And all of a sudden, going to school longer to be a baker or a chef looks like a much better way to support your family. So who are the kinds of people who go after police jobs? Wannabe cops, people that couldn't make it through screenings and processes that we had when we had respect for police 20 years ago, the 9/11 era of cops, when lots of people were trying to become law enforcement officers, when it was the cream of the crop who was getting behind the badge. Now we'll take anybody. And what happens when you take a police officer who shouldn't be behind the badge? Just, they don't have the intelligence, the disposition, the reaction, the right stuff to be a cop. Well, you're going to get worse and worse and worse policing. And ultimately, these people, this will get the government that they ask for. And you could say, well, I want better training and all this. Well, you defunded that. You took money away from Asheville, from Charlottesville, from Los Angeles. And we've seen nothing but a rise of crime. And I get so sick of the idea that you're going to blow it off as a statistic. It's a rise in crime. The politicians are going to say, well, like this guy from Salt Lake City, well, it's because we don't do a good job of measuring the outcomes of crime. I'm not going to treat it like a statistic. I'm not Joseph Stalin. I'm going to watch a video of Iryna Zarutska trying to get home on a train. And for no reason, someone stands up behind her and stabs her. I don't care about the statistics. I care about the people, because that's who's buried in the ground. Well, that asshole from Salt Lake City talks about how police contribute to crime.
Right.
Sorry, I'm too mad.
Well, let me just wrap by saying this. Dana Nessel in Michigan, the one that tried to prosecute our friend that
Strata.
Yep, and she lost. Tried to prosecute him because she's a virtue signaling. It's got nothing to do with the justice for the people. If it were for the justice,
part of the Gretchen Whitmer brand of government in Michigan.
Right. If it were for the justice of the people, she'd be worried about like what criminals they were going after, not what they do when
the fact that Miss Strata was arresting a murderer.
And
she
knew
excessive force by throwing him to the ground, and there was 2 people there, and he was by himself.
And by the way, she knew that they could not bring that into the trial. That's why she rushed the trial. They rushed that prosecution because they couldn't bring that evidence that he was a murderer into there because he hadn't been tried for the murder yet. They used him as they used him as a witness, as a state's witness. So what ended up happening, John?
Straw man prosecution.
So what ended up happening, John, was one of her closest friends was killed by a repeat offender, murdered, and probably a wonderful life. She was one of those, like those stories you hear all the time. And I'm not making light of them by any stretch, but like, Daisy, Daisy Fernandez owned a flower shop right in the center of downtown Seattle. And every day she would feed the homeless her leftover bread, and she would cook them soup. And she showed up at a shop one day and somebody cut her throat. Right. This is what I'm saying. The world is very cruel, and you can't, not everybody is going to deserve a 43rd or 44th chance. There's got to be a point, and you can't just throw your hands up and say, well, punishment doesn't work.
Well, we used to call it 3 strikes and you're out. Even Joe Biden signed off on that crime bill.
Yeah. Right. Well, I don't even want to talk about Joe Biden, but because I was going to say something that definitely would have been bad. But I don't know. That's kind of where I stand, John. I like, God rest her soul. And I do understand that there's a mental health crisis in the United States. By the way, the largest mental health facility in any county in the United States of America is the county jail.
That is. And we have a mental health crisis, and it's growing and growing and growing. But we also have a murder crisis. And as much empathy and compassion as I can have for people who have mental health problems, believe it or not, it's an issue that may be close and dear to my heart. But people have the right to live. And when I look at a country like El Salvador, where the president of El Salvador has been criticized for imprisoning millions of people, he says, you criticize me for imprisoning millions of people, but in truth, I set millions more free. I set them free from crime. I set them free from fear. And ultimately, everybody has a choice to make about whether or not they're going to spend their life in freedom or in prison. And it's a choice, a moral choice to do the right thing, the wrong thing, to wake up, to choose violence, or to choose peace. George Floyd could have gone to the library. He could have helped an old lady cross the street, but he made the wrong choices. He woke up that day and he used his own choices to do that. And that's why I have ever diminishing compassion for people, even with mental health crises, is because people have the right to live. Drew?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, guys.
Hold on. I do.
You can say it better.
Along the same lines. No, I'm not trying to say anything better. Along the same lines, the same people that are paying taxes, that are vocal, that say that they should defund the police and all that, are in the pool of the other people. So even if that's 10% of the population, 90% is not saying that, and they deserve protection. And that's who I want to protect.
JFI wants to do conspiracy theories on Charlie Kirk. We'll probably do that.
Not doing it. I'm not doing that. There are no conspiracy theories until that investigation is over. I'm not doing that.
Can we wait till it's over and then do it?
We can if you want. I'm not gonna, like, this guy was murdered in front of us, and let his family and the organization grieve. Like, I disagree. I love Candace Owens. I can't stand her right now. I hate her. She is using, in my opinion,
she's using it to increase her circulation.
No, it's not to increase her circulation. It's to drive a stake through the heart of the people at Daily Wire.
Oh, you think it literally is just that petty grievance?
Ben Shapiro specifically.
Oh, that's lame. I don't get into the nitty gritty of all their interpersonal beefs, I have to say, but
the lights just went out again.
He lives at a truck stop, people. We appreciate you guys watching tonight. No, we're not going to do those conspiracy theories. Maybe I'll do them over on my own show, which I have. Thank you guys for watching tonight. I know that it's just the kind of show that riles you up and gets you mad. And then what do you do with all those angry feelings? The truth is, as well, just do the best you can for the people around you. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Don't get too bogged down in the politics. Put your phone away and focus on the good things in life, because there are police officers out there every day, which I can personally attest to because I work for the police. They're going out there and doing good things for good people in your community all the time. And they don't get nearly enough credit.
On behalf of me and most of my chins, I just want to say good night, and I'll probably just go to sleep sitting right here because I'm not going to get up and turn these fucking lights on again.
Drew's mad. Everybody have a good night. Make sure you check us out on all the social media platforms, and leave us a voicemail, 848-COM911. That's 848-COM911. If we still do voicemails. Drew, it's been a hell of a night. You have a good night, buddy.
10,000 episodes.
10,000 episodes of Comm Center. Final episode of Comm Center. Who knows? All right, guys. Have a good night.